Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Sarah Martinez's palms were damp as she stepped into the Apex Sporting Goods boardroom. 12 suits, 12 stares, 12 chances to fail. They sat like judges at a firing squad, expressionless, and waiting while sunlight streamed across the polished table like a spotlight aimed at her nerves. Every breath she took tasted like coffee and expensive cologne, but under that, the acidic tang of fear. She'd rehearsed this moment hundreds of times in front of a mirror, worn grooves in her hardwood floor, pacing through bullet points and performance stats. But now, the real moment? It felt like the words had abandoned her, and maybe she knew why she wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this room, not in front of the men who ran one of the largest firearms companies in the country. She was supposed to be in the lab, behind a screen, quiet, obedient, invisible. Instead, she was here to ask them for a rifle. Her rifle, Ms. Martinez. The voice cut through her spiraling thoughts like a clean break. CEO Robert Chun, impeccably dressed, impeccably silent until now. You have 15 minutes. Convince us. She nodded, swallowing hard as she tapped the presentation remote. The screen behind her glowed to life, revealing the first image of her prototype. Sleek, futuristic, beautiful. She took a breath. Gentlemen, this is the future of precision shooting. No one moved. No one even blinked. The R15 platform has been the standard for decades, she continued, clicking the schematics and research graphs. But it was designed for combat, not for the modern civilian market, not for people like me. Still silence, her hand steadied as she found her rhythm. My design decreases felt recoil by 40%. It adjusts dynamically to different body types. The grip reduces fatigue. It's built not just for efficiency, but for the human behind the trigger. Her voice was gaining strength. The data, the projections, the manufacturing costs, all solid. She knew this pitch cold. This wasn't just an idea. It was 80 months of work. Her weekends, her social life, her faith in herself, soldered into steel. But when she looked up, Marcus Webb, VP of Sales, was smirking like a man already bored. And then he said it, "Sweetheart, this is all very cute, but maybe you should stick to designing kitchen gadgets. Leave the rifles to the men." Laughter erupted, loud, cruel, dismissive. Director of Engineering slammed the table, wheezing with laughter. "Does it come in pink?" "Maybe a lipstick compartment," someone added. Her breath caught, the room blurred. This wasn't criticism. This was mockery, a lifetime of work reduced to a punchline. She wanted to run, scream, slam the laptop closed, and never look back. But something stopped her. A sound, or rather the absence of one. Robert Chun hadn't laughed. In fact, he hadn't moved. His fingers were tapping slowly against the table. His jaw clenched. His eyes, steel gray and unreadable, were fixed on a prototype with an intensity that silenced the room before he even spoke. Enough. The word rang like a gunshot. The room froze. Laughter died mid-chuckle. Sarah blinked. Everyone did. "I've listened to a lot of product pitches in this room," Chum said, standing slowly. "Most of them? Minor tweaks, cosmetic changes, safe bets. But what Ms. Martinez just presented is different." He let the words hang. "It's bold, innovative, and frankly, your reaction?" He swept his gaze across the table. "Disappointing," Webb stammered. "Something about the military academy." Chun cut him off with surgical precision. "That was 25 years ago. Marcus." Then he turned back to Sarah. "Miss Martinez, we're hosting our annual company shooting competition tomorrow. Black Hawk Range, I want you there." Sarah froze. That wasn't part of the plan. She hadn't touched a competition-grade rifle in 3 years. Deliberately, engineers don't shoot, she told herself, not professionally, not in front of people who already think they know what you're good for. But Webb saw the hesitation, and he smiled. "Don't worry. Sweetheart, we'll start you with a .22. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." More laughter muted now, glancing at Chun for approval. But still there, still echoing. She felt her throat tighten, felt every rational voice in her head screaming, "Walk away." And then came the challenge. "If you outshoot even half these gentlemen tomorrow," Chun said, stepping forward, "we fund your project fully, prototyping, testing, market release, the whole line." "And if she loses?" Webb asked, smugness returning like bad cologne. "Then it's over. She goes back to engineering, and this design never sees daylight again." A pause, a breath, a decision. "I accept," Sarah heard herself say. It was like signing her own execution order. Webb grinned. "This is going to be fun." She stood alone, staring at the weapon case on the passenger seat. It was old, scuffed, the leather cracked and weathered from sand, sun, and stories no boardroom executive would ever understand. Her father's rifle case carried through 2 tours in Afghanistan, handed down to her at 18 like a legacy stitched in steel. Now it lay quiet, waiting. Sarah hadn't slept. She'd spent the night in her childhood garage, oiling the bolt action. 308 her father had custom built. Her hands remembered every step, muscle memory stretching awake after years of dormancy. Her father watched silently as she cleaned it, his weathered hands still steady despite the tremors that sometimes caught him when no one was looking. "Remember, Mia," he'd said, using the old family nickname. "Shooting's 90% mental. Those boys already lost the second. They underestimated you." Now it was dawn, and her stomach roiled with anxiety as she pulled into Black Hawk Range. 7 a.m. sharp. The smell hit her first gun oil. Damp dirt, coffee, and anticipation. Thick, electric. People were already there, setting up folding chairs, stacking branded catering trays near the observation tent. Someone had set up a professional camera rig. Webb hadn't been kidding about live streaming. This wasn't just a competition. It was entertainment. They wanted a show. Her humiliation in HD, her phone buzzed. Jessica kicked their asses. Annie Oakley. Sarah almost laughed, but the knot in her chest held firm. She stepped out of the car, carrying the rifle case with both hands like it held more than metal. It held the last of her pride, her father's respect, everything those men thought she couldn't be. She walked toward the firing line. Eyes followed her. The murmurs began. And then, well, she actually showed up. Marcus Webb's voice echoed across the range. He was dressed like he was heading into combat. Not a casual shooting match. Tactical vest, custom ear protection, a rifle so shiny it practically had its own spotlight. "Hope you brought something." "More than a BB gun, sweetheart." More laughter, again, but this time quieter, measured. The CEO was watching. Sarah ignored it. She walked to her lane, unzipping the case with careful hands. The rifle inside was not beautiful. It was scarred, the bluing worn thin along the barrel, the wooden stock dull with age, but it was clean, perfectly balanced and utterly hers. Someone scoffed behind her. "Is that even safe to fire?" Webb chuckled. She brought her grandfather's hunting rifle. "This is adorable." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The range master bill. An old Marine with permanent sunburn and a voice like gravel called everyone to the line. 12. Shooters, 3 stages, 100-yard precision, 200 rapid fire, 300 long range. Best total score wins. Let's keep it clean. Webb strutted over to show off his rifle to a group of interns. Custom Remington 730, Olympic specs, cost more than her car. Tom Harrison's rifle looked like a tank barrel on a tripod. David Parks had a monogrammed leather cheek rest. The other execs weren't there to compete. They were there to win. But Sarah wasn't watching them. She was breathing. 1 beat, 2. She adjusted the sling, checked her scope, found her rhythm. First stage, 100 yards. 5 shots, 10 minutes. Bill gave the signal. Webb shot first, his rifle barking loud. His group was decent tight, But drifting right, other execs followed. Some scattered shots, some decent, all serviceable. Then Sarah stepped to the line. The world narrowed. There was no boardroom, no laughter, no eyes on her. Just the target. 100 yards away, a crisp black dot in a sea of white. She exhaled, gently squeezed. The first shot punched a clean hole dead center. The second, same spot. By the third, the crowd stopped murmuring. By the fourth, they were silent. The fifth landed in the same ragged opening as the others. Bill walked. Downrange, looked, walked back. Perfect score, he announced. 50 out of 50. Gasps, then silence. Sarah stepped back. Her hands were still, her heart calm. She could feel the shift in the air. Webb's jaw tightened. Beginner's luck, he muttered. But the edge in his voice betrayed him. Next stage, 200-yard rapid fire. 5 shots, 1 magazine, no breaks. Sarah loaded calmly. The other shooters looked less calm. Ready. Bill called. Bang, 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 bang. Sarah's rifle fired in smooth, mechanical rhythm. Not rushed, not slow. Just exact. When the dust settled, Bill lifted her target again. Another tight group, all in the 10 ring. Smaller than a silver dollar, Webb missed the 10 ring entirely. Twice. One exec dropped a round and fumbled with his bolt. Another misjudged wind and went wide right. By now, the crowd wasn't laughing. They were watching, and Sarah? She wasn't smiling. She was focused, controlled, still carrying the weight of every slight ever spoken to her. It wasn't about showing off. It was about never being laughed at again. Then came the third stage, 300 yards. Through haze and shifting wind, tiny black dots in the distance. The kind of shot that separates the real shooters from the hobbyists. The execs fired one by one. Their shots scattered like confetti. Even the former Army officer Peterson barely managed 3 hits. Webb missed the entire target on his first shot. And then it was Sarah's turn. The wind shifted, soft, left to right. Barely enough to measure. She lay prone, aligning the scope. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. She pulled the trigger. The round cracked through the air, and she already knew it was perfect. 1 hole, dead center, then the second. Same. Then the third. A whisper wider. By the 5th, people were holding their breath. Bill walked the long distance slowly, deliberately, lifted the target. 5 shots, 1 ragged hole. A nickel could cover it. He stared at it for a long second. In 30 years of running this range, he said, voice tight with awe, I've never seen shooting like that. The crowd erupted, cheers, shouts, applause, chants of her name rising like thunder. Sarah didn't move. She didn't need to. The room that once laughed at her now stood in open awe. But she didn't do it for them. She did it for the girl who stood alone at a boardroom table. Hands shaking, heart burning. She did it because they thought. She wouldn't, because they needed to remember. She never asked for permission, only for a rifle. What did it feel like to win a battle no one thought you'd survive? Sarah Martinez stood still at the edge of the range, her fingers resting lightly on the wooden stock of her father's rifle, the cheers washing over her like something distant. Detached, she wasn't smiling. Not yet. She was remembering. Not the targets, not even the shots, but the silence that had come after each one. That sharp, breathless pause when doubt collapsed into disbelief. It was the sound of the impossible reshaping reality. Someone clapped her on the shoulder. Tom Harrison, red-faced, sweating. The same man who had laughed about lipstick compartments just a day before. I owe you an apology, he said. His voice cracked a little. That was the cleanest shooting I've ever seen, ever. Others lined up behind him. David Park, who'd once wiped tears of laughter from his eyes, while mocking her, now couldn't meet hers. Sarah, we misjudged, all of us. She didn't speak. She just nodded. Because she didn't need their apologies. She needed them to remember. Robert Chun approached. hands in his pockets, a rare glint of satisfaction in his otherwise impassive eyes. "Miss Martinez," he said, just loud enough for only her to hear. "I meant what I said in that room. What you did today. That's leadership under pressure, with everything to lose." He turned toward the crowd and raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I believe we've found our new director of firearms innovation, and I believe this." He motioned toward Sarah's rifle. "Will be the beginning of what we'll proudly call the Martinez Precision Series." The cheers rose again. Behind him, Marcus Webb stood frozen, his rifle limp in his hands, his face drained of color. His final target had looked like it'd been hit with birdshot scattered, panicked, nothing but noise and failure. He didn't speak, didn't argue, because there was nothing left to say. He knew what everyone else had realized. Sarah Martinez didn't just win. She had redefined the battlefield, and not with volume, not with bravado, but with precision, with patience, with quiet fire. Later, as the crowd began to thin and the camera crews packed up their gear, Sarah sat on the tailgate of her car. Unzipping her rifle case with practiced care, her hands moved slowly, not because they were tired, but because something inside her felt full heavy. She glanced at her phone. 27 missed messages. Her roommate had been live texting from the watch party at a downtown bar, where apparently the moment Sarah hit her third perfect shot at 300 yards, a crowd of Apex interns started chanting Martinez 2028. Her mother had left a voice message, barely holding it together through happy sobs. And her father had sent just 2 words. "You remembered." She swallowed hard. The tears came not loud, not dramatic, just quiet streaks down her face as she rested the worn rifle across her lap. She had remembered how he taught her to adjust for wind by watching leaves instead of flags. How he made her shoot blindfolded, not to see the target, but to feel her body settle into perfect alignment. How he once told her, kneeling beside her in the grass when she was 12 and furious at missing a shot, "Mia, a rifle isn't power, it's responsibility. A good shot doesn't make noise. She makes decisions." She hadn't thought about that moment in years, but now she understood. Later that afternoon, Sarah stepped into the Apex lobby and walked past a dozen stunned interns who had watched the entire live stream on their break room monitor. No one laughed, no one whispered. They just watched her pass in quiet awe. By the time she reached her office, an email from HR was waiting. Title: Promotion approved, effective immediately. Attached was a budget authorization signed by CEO Robert Chung for the full development and launch of the Martinez Precision Series. Beneath that, a personal note: "We don't need louder voices. We need better ones. Welcome to the front line, Sarah." She read it twice. Then she stood, looked at the whiteboard filled with old schematics, and began to erase. Not everything, just the lines she now saw differently. Not because they were wrong, but because she wasn't afraid anymore. How do you stay grounded when the world suddenly starts looking up at you? 6 months had passed, and everything had changed. Sarah Martinez stood on a glass-paneled stage in Las Vegas, the National Shooting Sports Foundation Expo buzzing with thousands of attendees, camera flashes, and corporate whispers. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the Apex logo, and just beneath it, her name, her series, the Martinez Precision line. The applause was thunderous, but all Sarah could think about was how cold her hands felt. Not from nerves, but from memory. Because 6 months ago, those same hands had been shaking as she reached for her laptop, humiliated and burning with rage in a boardroom full of men who'd laughed at her before she'd even spoken. Now, those men sat in the front row, buttoned up and smiling some genuinely, some like politicians at a funeral, while Sarah accepted the most coveted innovation award in the shooting industry. But none of that touched her. Not really. What mattered was what happened in between. The rifle had launched just 4 months earlier. The Martinez M1, a refined version of her prototype, had shattered pre-order records in the first 72 hours. Backorders stretched 8 months deep, dealers from 5 countries begged for distribution rights. The marketing team, once dismissive of her original pitch, now called her a branding unicorn. But Sarah didn't care about unicorns. She cared about who was buying. First came the small frame shooters, the underserved segment she'd built. The system for women, young competitors, veterans recovering from injury. Then came the professionals, competition marksmen, tactical trainers, even elite security contractors, not because it was pretty, but because it worked. It was fast, balanced, unforgiving in the hands of the careless, but near magic when treated right, like the woman who designed it. In her new role as Director of Firearms Innovation, Sarah spent her days toggling between the testing range and the design lab. She led a lean team, half engineers, half former operators, all personally chosen, no posturing, no office politics, just people who cared about excellence and the rifle. It spoke for itself, but even in success, the ghost lingered. There were still meetings where she caught someone glancing at her credentials a little too long. Still whispers at trade shows. That's the girl who embarrassed half her board at Blackhawk, right? And always, somewhere in the background, the quiet question. Did she earn it, or did Chun give her a platform because it made the company look progressive? She never answered because she didn't need to. Her results did the talking. So did the numbers. The Martinez series wasn't just selling. It was changing the language of precision rifles. Other companies had scrambled to redesign their platforms within weeks. Her former critics in engineering now asked to collaborate. Even the LA's marketing team, once mocking, had pivoted their campaigns to center around her name. There was one person she hadn't seen since the range, Marcus Webb. He'd been restructured quietly a few weeks after the Blackhawk shoot. No farewell memo, no party, just a line in the company report and a closed-door HR meeting. She didn't celebrate his departure. She didn't need revenge. She had something better legacy. Back at the expo, Sarah took the award in her hands, an engraved steel plaque, and looked into the crowd. Front row, her mother, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, Jessica, filming the moment and whispering sarcastic commentary to a livestream audience, and between them, straight-backed in his dress blues, Master Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez. Her father, he didn't clap, not at first. He just nodded once, slow, proud. And that was the moment that finally broke Sarah's composure, because her story hadn't started in a boardroom. It had started in a dusty field, lying prone with her cheek pressed against a worn wooden stock, and a voice beside her whispering about wind, breath, and intention. That's what this was. Not a trophy, not a promotion, a full-circle moment, a rifle in her hands, a name on the barrel, and the knowledge that she hadn't shouted for recognition. She'd whispered through action. After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned and reporters jostled for post-interview quotes, Sarah slipped out a side exit with her family. They found a quiet booth in a diner down the strip. No PR, no press, just black coffee and warm menus and the people who mattered. Jessica raised her glass of Coke. To Sarah, the girl who asked for a rifle and built an empire instead, her mother beamed. Her father said nothing, just reached across the table and gently rested his calloused hand over hers. He didn't have to speak. She heard him loud and clear. What happens when your greatest victory begins to echo in places you never meant it to? The Martinez M1 was everywhere now. TV spots, YouTube reviews, social feeds flooded with photos, some post, some real, hunters, competitors, veterans, mothers, teenagers at their first match. And then something else. Images started appearing that made Sarah pause mid-scroll. A photo from overseas, dusty terrain. A security contractor holding an M1 variant, posed beside an armored SUV. His fingers in a peace sign, but his eyes cold. Too cold. Another image. A rebel group in a border conflict. Blurred faces. An M1 in the hands of someone who looked barely old enough to hold it. It wasn't her rifle, not the standard model. It had been modified, stripped, abused, but the silhouette was unmistakable. She stared at that photo for an hour, then shut off her phone. The next morning, she walked into her office and stared at the wall, where a quote had been painted in bold black letters above the design board. Function is truth. She'd chosen that phrase, a reminder, clean, focused. Now it felt like a question. Truth. For whom? That week, a quiet memo circulated through Apex Legal. Foreign third-party buyers were being investigated for unauthorized distribution of Apex products. Sarah wasn't named. Her team wasn't implicated, but it didn't matter. She felt it in her chest like a bruise, because this was never supposed to happen. She hadn't designed a weapon to arm conflicts or prop up regimes. She built it to include, to empower, to make people like her feel seen. Now it was in hands she didn't know, places she couldn't reach, and it made her wonder, where did innovation end and consequence begin? She tried to shake it, buried herself in development, sketched prototypes, slept in the lab, smiled through interviews, recited marketing lines that once felt like gospel. But something was shifting. One night, past midnight, she stood alone at the Apex range, her old rifle beside her, untouched. She stared at a fresh paper target. 10 yards, a joke of a distance. She raised the rifle, fired once, dead center. But it didn't feel like victory anymore. It felt like noise. Behind her, the range door creaked open. Footsteps, familiar, steady. Her father's voice. "I taught you to shoot straight," he said. "Didn't teach you how to carry it." She didn't turn around. Her voice was tight. "I didn't think I'd have to." He stepped beside her, looked at the target. "Most people don't," he said. "Not until the damage is already done." She looked at him, eyes glassy. "They're using it in conflicts, ones I don't support. Kids are carrying it, mercenaries. I saw the photos." Miguel nodded, quiet, thoughtful. "You built a tool, Mia," he said. "Tools don't choose. Who holds them? People do. That's not good enough." "I know." He paused. "But it's true." They stood in silence. Then he added, "The question isn't whether someone used it wrong. It's what you do now that you know." Later, in her office, she pulled down every prototype photo, every magazine cover, every framed award, and she opened a blank notebook. She began sketching again, not for sales, not for applause, for responsibility. The next month, Sarah made an announcement during a product webinar. She didn't clear it with PR. She didn't ask for permission. She just said it. "Starting now, the Martinez series will only be sold through vetted domestic distributors. We're halting all international contracts until we can verify end-user integrity. I know this will affect revenue. I know it may hurt Apex short-term, but I didn't build this rifle to be a headline in a proxy war. I built it for shooters who believe in discipline, precision, and purpose." The room went silent. Then, one by one, viewers started messaging. Some criticized, called her naive, idealistic. Others thanked her. A former combat medic messaged, "Thank you for remembering. It's not just about performance. It's about intention." A young woman from Vermont wrote, "I bought your rifle because it made me feel like I belonged. Now I know." You meant it. Sarah didn't reply to every message. She didn't need to. She just kept working. That night, she sat again at the range. This time, with a new prototype. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was right. Lower power, easier recoil, precision for training. Built not for conflict, but for learning. She named it the M1S. The SUD stood for start. Sometimes the most powerful shot isn't the loudest one. It's the one that teaches someone how to hold a weapon with care. What if success doesn't feel like you thought it would? 3 months after the M1S launched, Sarah Martinez sat alone in her glass-walled corner office, surrounded by glowing metrics and congratulatory emails and felt empty. The rifle was a hit again. It had sold out within the first month of training program rollouts. Law enforcement academies requested demos. High school precision leagues reached out with custom requests. Parents, mothers, especially, thanked her for giving their daughters a rifle that didn't intimidate them. And still, she sat there, staring at the spreadsheet with eyes that didn't see, because somewhere between the range and the boardroom, she had lost the thread of herself. The girl who once rehearsed her pitch in a fogged-up bathroom mirror had become a woman executives now tiptoed around. She'd earned her respect, commanded it, but not through conversation, through silence, through distance. Through results, she'd become sharp, efficient, and increasingly alone. Even Jessica had noticed. "You don't talk like you used to," she said one night over takeout. "You sound like them now, like the men in the suits." Sarah bristled, then deflated. Because she wasn't wrong. Somewhere in the victory, Sarah had stopped asking questions and started issuing statements. Her calendar was booked months out, press, panels, think tanks. Her voice had weight now, but only when polished and carefully measured. She missed being curious. She missed sketching ideas on diner napkins at midnight, when no one cared if they were perfect. She missed a version of herself that still felt like she had something to prove, because now everyone listened, but not everyone understood. Her decision to limit international contracts had sparked backlash. Stockholders complained. Competitors mocked her publicly, accused Apex of virtue signaling. Even some of her own team members questioned her judgment. "You can't police the world," one engineer said during a closed-door meeting. "If we don't sell to them, someone else will." Sarah stared at him across the table, then let someone else. They left the company 2 weeks later, but the damage lingered. Rumors began that Sarah was difficult, that she micromanaged, that she'd become too emotional to lead without Chun's protection, and worst of all, she believed some of it. Late one night, she wandered down to the old prototype lab. No one used it anymore. Her new office had a team of CAD artists and a 3D print room. Everything state-of-the-art. But this space? It still smelled like solder, sweat, and possibility. She found her old sketchpad in a drawer, the one she kept before the first presentation, before the mockery, before the deal at Black Hawk. She flipped through pages, fingers tracing the rough graphite lines. They weren't perfect. Some were messy, unrefined, naive, but they were hers, not market-tested, not investor-approved, raw. She stayed there all night. The next morning, she walked into the executive conference room for a quarterly review. The suits were waiting, eyes tired, voices clipped. They expected reports, numbers, growth forecasts. She gave them something else. "I'm stepping down as Director of Firearms Innovation," she said. Silence. "Effective immediately. I'll continue to consult, but I'm reallocating my role to focus on R&D mentorship and first-generation shooter outreach." Chung raised a brow but didn't speak. Webb's replacement looked confused. "You're walking away? From all this?" Sarah looked around the room. The brushed steel walls, the silent tension, the distant politeness. "I'm not walking away," she said quietly. "I'm walking back." That afternoon, she moved her things to the back wing of the facility, to a small, windowless room next to the training range. She called it the workbench. No title plate, no secretary, just tools, coffee, and a small plaque she nailed to the wall herself. "We don't build weapons. We build responsibility." Some thought she was burning out. Others thought she was retreating. But the truth was simpler. Sarah wasn't finished. She was just getting closer to where she started. And this time, she wasn't alone. She started mentoring young engineers, first-time designers, girls who showed up with notebooks full of rough drawings and fire in their eyes. She saw herself in them, and slowly, she remembered how to be that version of herself again. The one who didn't need the corner office, the one who just wanted her ideas to matter. And in that quiet, stripped-down space, she started building again. Not just rifles, but trust, purpose, and maybe redemption. What if the people who followed you weren't waiting for permission? The first time Sarah saw one of the girls with the same calloused trigger finger she had at 15, it stopped her cold. It was a Saturday, mid-spring. Sarah was visiting a small shooting clinic on the outskirts of Flagstaff. Nothing official, just a dusty community range, some hay bales, and a few volunteers trying to teach fundamentals. She was just passing through. She told herself that, but then she saw the girl. No older than 13, skinny arms, faded hoodie, serious eyes. Her stance was off, elbows too tight, but her breath control? Spot on. Sarah knelt beside her, quietly. You know you're holding a little tension in your right wrist. The girl turned, didn't smile, just nodded, adjusted, breathed, fired. The shot rang out clean. Dead center. Sarah blinked, then noticed the rifle. It wasn't hers, not directly, but it was a Martinez clone, one of the dozens of unauthorized knockoffs that had flooded the secondary market since her design became a phenomenon. She should have been upset, but she wasn't, because the rifle worked, it fit. It was scratched. Second-hand, maybe even third, but it was in the hands of someone who wanted it, someone who found confidence in it. After the session, the girl came over, still quiet. You're Sarah, right? She asked. Sarah nodded. My uncle says you're the reason I can shoot like this. Sarah looked at her. The girl was trying to sound casual, brave, but there was hope in her voice, tucked between syllables like a secret. He also says some people don't like it, girls shooting, but I told him they probably never saw you shoot. Sarah smiled. You tell your uncle he's half right. The girl grinned. Can I show you my logbook? I'm tracking every group size. Sarah spent the next hour flipping through pencil marks, watching a kid become something bigger than herself, shot by shot, millimeter by millimeter. She didn't tell anyone about that day. Not the Apex team, not Jessica, not even her father, but it stayed with her, because something was shifting again, and this time, it wasn't about her. It was about them. Over the next few months, Sarah visited more ranges, quietly, without press. No cameras. She walked into VFW halls in the Midwest, shooting academies in Utah. She watched teenage girls swap stories about drop compensation and match pressure like they were talking about school dances. At one clinic, she watched a woman in her 60s teach a room full of recruits how to assemble their M1S variants faster than the young instructors could blink. You ever fire in competition? Sarah asked. The woman smiled. No, but I raised 2 daughters who did. One of them now teaches at the academy. Martinez series? 3 rifles between them, all worn in, all deadly. And that's when Sarah understood what was happening. She hadn't built a product. She'd lit a fuse, a quiet, slow-burning revolution. Not political, not aggressive, just unignorable. She'd offered a tool, a design, and women had taken it and built something bigger. They didn't ask. They didn't wait. They just loaded, adjusted, breathed, and fired. And Sarah, she was no longer the face of the movement. She was the beginning of it. Back in her workbench lab, she pinned a new note above her desk. You don't need to be the loudest voice, just the first one brave enough to speak. That fall, she received a letter, handwritten, thick paper, no return address. Inside, a photo. A row of young women standing together at the National Junior Marksman Championships. 12 in total. 8 of them held rifles from her line. One held up a sign that read, "Let her shoot." On the back, someone had written, "They used to laugh at us for showing up. Now they ask us for tips." Sarah held the photo in her hands for a long time. Then she reached for her father's rifle, the old one, the one that started it all. She cleaned it, oiled the bolt, rechecked the scope, and just before sunset, she drove back to Black Hawk Range. No announcement, no crowd, Just her. She set the target at 300 yards. Same lane, same bench. She loaded 5 rounds, breathed, fired. Each shot echoed into the wind, quiet and final. Then she walked downrange. 5 holes. Tight, not perfect, but close. She left the target up. No name, no message. Just a pattern, a reminder for the next girl, the next doubt, the next beginning. What if the loudest thing she ever said was something she didn't say at all? It was the anniversary of the shoot. Black Hawk Range, quiet morning. Fog still clinging to the trees. The benches were freshly painted, the targets reset and near. Lane 7, a small brass plaque had been bolted to the table. It read, Martinez Lane, reserved for the first shot that changed everything. Sarah hadn't approved it, didn't know who did, but she stood before it now, hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket. The air cold enough to sting her cheeks. Her father's old rifle slung across her back like it belonged there, like it always had. She hadn't come to shoot. She'd come to remember. It had been a year, since the mockery, since the competition, since the moment that split her life into before and after, and for all the headlines, the handshakes, the hallway murals. It wasn't any of that she thought about now. She thought about the silence, the one that came after her final shot, when even the trees seemed to hold their breath. She thought about what she almost did, walking out that day, humiliated, unheard, and how close she came to giving them exactly what they wanted, her absence. Instead, she had stayed, fired, and everything that followed had started not with a speech or a fight, but with a decision, a single quiet no. No, I will not be dismissed. No, I will not design your pink accessory. No, I will not let you speak for me, over me, or about me without consequence. Not rage, not protest, just precision. She smiled faintly. It wasn't revenge that had fueled her. It was refusal. Back at the parking lot, her phone buzzed. Another message, this time from the Apex PR team. A national interview offer. Major outlet, big reach. She stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it, because that wasn't what she wanted anymore. Not a microphone, not applause. She wanted to build back at her workbench. 3 new interns were waiting. 2 women, 1 non-binary student from an engineering scholarship program she helped fund. They were bright, green, eager. She didn't say much during their first session, just handed them tools, pulled up a schematic, nodded. They got it. That evening, Jessica came by with takeout, plopped down on the floor of the lab, and stared at the organized chaos of blueprints and polymer samples. You ever gonna let them put your name on the lobby? Sarah didn't look up. Already there. Jessica rolled her eyes. No, I mean like big lights, a sign. Maybe a quote underneath like, she changed the industry. Sarah just smiled. No, she said quietly. They'll change it. I just got it moving. Jessica looked at her. So what now? New rifle? Retirement? KBO? Sarah paused, then answered without looking up. I teach, I watch, I protect what we built, quietly. Jessica smirked. So, you're the sniper now. Sarah looked at her. No. She set her pencil down, met her friend's eyes. I'm the range. The space where others learn to aim, to breathe, to believe. Later that night, after Jessica left and the shop lights dimmed, Sarah walked back over to her father's rifle. She ran a hand along the stock. The wood worn smooth, where years of calloused hands had held it steady. She closed her eyes and thought about the weight of it. Not the metal, the meaning. And with her head bowed slightly, she whispered what had become the only truth that ever mattered. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And with that, she turned out the lights and went back to work.